Well, greetings everyone, and welcome once again to another Wednesday night. Happy Valentine's Day. In case I guess someone didn't know it, but happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there. And as usual, we're glad to be here on a Wednesday night. If you look right below there, you'll see our usual commercials. You can uh, subscribe and donate, of course, right here on YouTube. And our Cash App is $JEK3. So let's get right to the show after the Super Bowl here. I see Dave is here. Dave, how are we doing today?
Okay. How you doing, James?
I'm doing great. Weather out here in Cali is kind of broke a little bit. It's still a little chilly at night. Believe it or not, close to the 40s. I mean, I'm talking about like 43, 44, not 49, 48, but
Get your winter coat out, huh?
Hey,
Great.
I'm looking for that homeless person I gave my triple goose to right now. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So guys, I hope everyone enjoyed the Super Bowl. As I said last week, you just don't bet against Patrick Mahomes. You know. So, but let's get down to some of the other news that we do have in the sports world, and there are some other things happening. Even though football season is over with, it is called a sports crib, so we do talk about more than one thing. So let's get right down here to business. And Dave, do you have a Sue's Corner for us tonight?
Indeed. Yep. Sue actually asked me to forward your agenda, which I did, and then here's what she responded with. Good guys do win sometimes. Marc-Andre Fleury, beloved ex-Pittsburgh Penguin goalie who is now with the Minnesota Wild, has moved into second place in history in wins and only the fourth goalie to play 1,000 games or more. Fleury passed Patrick Roy for second in NHL history with his 552 wins, now 553, and has played in over 1,009 games. He's gotten much recognition for this, including from his former teammates who presented him with gifts and another win recently. He beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. He's known to be a stellar individual off and on the ice. We wish he never left Pittsburgh. And then she has another one. Penn State wrestling coach Cale Sanderson has hit another coaching milestone. Sanderson won his 201st duel as a Penn State's head coach Monday night when his team secured a victory over Rutgers. The win gives him 245 overall wins, with 44 at Iowa State, where he began his head coaching career, and builds on his Penn State record for wins as the program's head coach. Sanderson's 10 national titles as a head coach puts him among the elite in all of college sports, with no sign of the program slowing down. Sanderson is also known as an outstanding person on and off the mat. In an interview a few years ago, quote, "What was the goal 10 years ago? Just have to have a program that's competing for national championships on a regular basis," Sanderson said prior to the start of the season. "But ultimately, we want kids that when they graduate, they're glad they came to Penn State and go out and make a difference in the world," unquote. So that was Sue's Corner.
Right. Too bad Demetrius isn't here to comment on some of that hockey knowledge there. I know he does follow his Detroit hockey team also.
Right, and Bill on wrestling, college wrestling.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, let's get to the show here. I'm going to start off with a little NCAA college football here. And Deshaun Foster is the new head coach at UCLA. Bo, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, they had to have one, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I don't see it as a bad thing. It's not like Chip Kelly was killing it, right? So, um, I think it's probably a step in the right direction.
Well, speaking of Chip Kelly, now he's left UCLA where he was probably going to get fired anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And but the interesting thing about Chip is that he always seems to land on his feet. Uh, Even though he took a $4 million pay cut, he ends up being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State.
Yep.
How does that work, Bo?
I mean, I think that was I'm protecting my career because a move looks better than a firing. And Day is on shaky ground, right? There was talk about him potentially getting fired last year. So if there's a scenario where he does get fired in the next year or two, that puts him in a prime spot to try and just elevate his position. Plus, I think him entertaining some NFL jobs might have had UCLA kind of on the fence anyway, right? Because there was talk about him potentially getting fired in the future. And one of those, oh, you have your foot out the door looking at NFL jobs. Why don't you just bring your other foot out the door and say, see you later?
Dave, I'm sure the name Chip Kelly is very familiar to you. What did you think about him being hired at the Ohio State University?
Yeah, I just wonder, does he still want to be a head coach? And with the all the changes with the transfer portal, the the NIL issues, and all this kind of stuff, it's made head coaching, I think, way more complicated for head coaches in college.
Yep.
And it may have some head coaches wondering, well, hey, do I want to be an administrator, or do I want to be a football coach? And it may have some coaches that at one point felt that being a head coach was what their end goal was. That if it's meaning that they're going to be more of an administrator, you might have some deciding, well, no, maybe I'll top out at a coordinator position.
Well, especially since you have to recruit your own players now, right? Like it used to be, you got them to your school and you were pretty much kind of good, right? You'd have a couple people transfer out every now and then, but for the most part, once you got them there, they were kind of there. And now, not only do you have to recruit new people in, but you have to keep recruiting your own players. And then there's 2 portal windows, so you could still lose them even once the season starts. Like it's a little bit of a mess. So I would get it if you wanted to not be a part of that.
Yeah, like you said, it's certainly a changing face. So I'm not, but one thing you got to give Chip for, I mean, he does have an impressive resume, if nothing else.
And maybe he will hop back into the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't do player personnel, I think it'll be all right.
Well, I mean, once again, I'm kind of thinking, like when you see guys, that are much more qualified and around that age group, I think Chip made the right move here. He can stay there a couple of years and, kind of peacefully go out to pasture or, whatever. But, I think it was kind of, I think, like you said, Bo, it was kind of a place where, it was safe and, he was probably going to get fired anyway. Looking around at some of the trades here, the one thing that I noticed, and maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm just that guy with the black socks, But you know,
Already?
well, this is something that we've constantly talked about for the last 3 years or so. And that's the Lakers when it comes time to make these trades, when it comes time to better the team, they always seem to want to go to the old folks' home. You know, now we have Spencer Dinwiddie. And I'm not saying that he's not an asset, but when you have, you know, LeBron on virtually his last legs, but of course, LeBron's last legs are much better than most of these guys out here on the, getting out into the league right now anyway. But the thing is, Bo, is it just me, or am I kicking rocks here, or does it seem like the Lakers tend to always go for the veterans instead of when they have good players that are developing into good players? I mean, you know, they seem to be content to trade those away for veterans. Well, this is a younger league. I mean, Steph Curry is, we got Klay Thompson coming off the bench.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as long as you have LeBron, it's going to be that way, because anything we've seen throughout his career is he doesn't particularly love playing with the young guys. Right. So as long as he's the linchpin of your team, you got to have the pieces around him that he likes to play with. Unfortunately for the Lakers, that really only works if you're playing in the bubble and you only have to play, 3 of the months.
I mean, he says he wants to play with his son. I mean, by then he'll be 40. Dave, what's your thoughts on this?
No, I not much. I think, with the NBA, it's such a player-driven league, and hey, you got to please your star players. And if those are the players that he wants to bring in, well then it behooves the Lakers to bring in those players. In terms of him playing with his son, I mentioned the other day, I could see him maybe retiring and then coming back on a 2 or 3 week contract to play some games with them. But I have a hard time. I guess he could still do it. He could still play with his son, but does the team want to be competitive or keep people in the seats? And if they're competitive, they're going to have people in the seats. But he's a huge draw, everywhere, even outside of basketball.
I mean, that's the Lakers, though, right? Like they want the big name splash player. Winning is a bonus, but they seem like they don't always care about that.
Right now, Kobe is spinning. You know that, Bo, right?
I know, but look at some of the teams they put around Kobe. They weren't exactly like, hey, world beaters. You're like, okay, we have Kobe and then everyone else.
Yeah, I guess that just seems to be the culture. We'll bring in the older guys and hope that they can mesh. But hey, let's talk about one of the stars of the league, and he accomplished something that I think hadn't been accomplished in 40 years. He got a triple double, which included 10 blocks. I got the Kool-Aid. Who's sipping with me? Bo?
I mean, he can be good. There's no doubt. Like I get why there was so much hype about him. My biggest question is, with his frame, is he gonna stay healthy? How long can his career really be? Because he is a say thin human, right? Like he
like Manute Bull.
Yes.
Right. So I mean, I worry about his durability, but I mean, he's big, right? He's going to get blocks. And he can play basketball. So hopefully he can stay healthy. That's really where I'm curious about his game moving forward.
Yeah. Are you familiar with this young kid, Dave?
No, no. But whenever you described his frame, I thought of Manute Bull,
Yeah.
who was he was a great blocker too, but he was almost had like an alien physique,
Yeah. Well, he's not
and,
quite.
and reportedly killed a lion back in the day. I mean, he was
Well,
a
this
pretty
kid ain't
incredible
killing any
individual.
lions.
But he is putting on a low weight, though, Bo. He's not. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
But I mean, I still think when he goes up on the scale, I do think that they put a weight vest on it.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Like, this kid could definitely eat a couple cheeseburgers. Like he needs a little bit more weight when he's trying to lean on somebody.
I think he should dine with Charles. I think. I think.
I mean, I don't know if he needs to go that route. He's definitely getting hurt if he does that.
Bo, with Embiid down, who's your way too early MVP candidate?
Man, I don't know. I don't even have a good response for that. Like, who's going to be left after the 65 game rule?
Jokic.
It's going to be some like sixth man.
Jokic is still on. He's on track right now.
Yeah.
I think Giannis would have to. I think he's on a slim count here. I don't know, but
I think he can only miss like 2 more games, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I mean, that's going to happen. So he's out. I mean, like this is now an award of attrition as opposed to who's actually good. Not to say that, Jokic isn't, like, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying there's not going to be a lot of options.
So they have a cap on the number of games a player can participate in?
You didn't hear about this rule? Okay, so let me break this rule down to you because it's good and dumb all at the same time. So because of so many people load managing and, Kawhi was the worst case of this, right? Like he would just randomly not play and he'd miss, 20 plus games a year just cause, right? Not injured, just I'm not playing today, right? And people got tired of buying tickets to watch basically your bench team gets smoked by somebody's full strength roster, right?
Right.
People were getting mad at that. And it had gotten to the point where there's enough players doing it that the NBA is like, okay, we got to step in and do something. Ownership was like, hey, this can't happen. We're paying you. These are guaranteed contracts. You guys aren't actually playing the games, right? So they implement this 65 game rule, which if you play less than 65 games, you are no longer eligible for MVPs, all-star games, all-pro teams, all of that. So anything in your contract that's incentive-based, based on all-star appearances and stuff like that, immediately those are gone, right? You just lose that money outright. And you can't be an MVP. You could have the best numbers, miss 60, if you only hit 65 games, you can't be the MVP.
Wow.
So this also means that if you're in those games, you have to play at least 20 minutes to count for a game. You can have, I believe it's one game where you have 18, or maybe it's 2 games where you can have 18. So if you're just under for whatever reason. So in a way, I like the rule. Obviously, that does not affect like bench players, right? Because they don't always play. So it doesn't affect them so much because just game plan may not have them hit the floor. But so missing games wouldn't really affect like a 6th man of the year, anything like that, right? But in a way, I like the rule because I'm tired of all the load managing. Like you want to see the stars on the floor. At the same time, you have guys like Embiid who gets hurt. It's a legitimate injury, right? You're going to miss time because of, inevitably a surgery, probably season ending, right? in that scenario, there needs to be some amendments to this rule, right? Because I don't think you should necessarily be penalized because you had an injury, right? Like, say you killed it all year, clearly the best, you have an injury, you miss that mark. Do I think you can't be the MVP? I mean, you might have been that MVP that year. I also don't know that you necessarily should get docked pay because you got hurt. Now, if you're just load managing, where you were very capable of playing, you just decided to, go home and play Xbox, then yeah, I have no problem with you getting docked pay. So this rule needs to evolve. It's the first year of it, but it's a rule that's here to stay.
I think we should call it the Kyrie rule.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. It kind of is.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Well, it sounds, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the stars on the court for the fans, which makes sense. I mean, yeah.
And it's what spawned the in-season tournament, which is stupid, right? Now, soccer does it. So if you're a soccer fan out there, sorry, I don't watch soccer. I don't know what to tell you. But but it's dumb because I remember watching sports when, the millions of dollars that they make and the want to win was enough to, I don't know, show up to work and play. And apparently that's not enough. So now they have this in-season tournament thing. And, maybe that's why the Lakers don't care about old guys, because they're still fresh when that thing happens. So even if they don't win the actual NBA title, they get to raise that banner because they won that earlier this year.
Right. So now, are there actually players that are not missing the mark or that won't miss the mark, not because of injury, but because it's like what?
There are players that have already missed the mark, and a couple of players that realistically are a game or two away, and there's still too many games left. They're probably going to end up missing also. So that'll take them out of all-star games. It'll take it out of, any kind of awards they could potentially win. So, I mean, it's the rule. I mean, and it's not like it's a crazy rule. It's basically saying you have to play 80% of the season.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what job can you
They're
think
not being paid 80% of their contract to play 80% of the games.
No.
They're being paid 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Now, which job, if you show up 80% of the time, are you still employed at? Because I've never worked at one.
Right. Or continue to be paid 100%.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Right. In all of those scenarios, even if you were paid by the hour, so you're not getting paid, you're probably still getting fired.
And these are guaranteed contracts, Joe, not like the NFL. These are guaranteed contracts.
Yeah, they're fully guaranteed, and then they have escalators on top, rather than your pay is based on escalators, right? Like this is your contract, and then if you get these things, we're gonna throw bonuses at you.
All right, guys, let's talk about our NFL Hall of Fame. We have 7 inductees, 5 modern day, and 2 senior. Our modern day consists of Devin Hester. He makes history as a kick returner. Devin Freeney, defensive end with the Colts for 11 years. Andre Johnson, wide receivers, 12 years with the Texans. Patrick Willis, might have wanted to bring him out last Sunday. But anyway, Patrick Willis, linebacker for the 49ers. And Julius Peppers, first ballot and defensive end. Our 2 senior finalists were Randy Gradishar. Well, excuse me, I thought Randy was in there years ago. Wow. And Steve McMichael, defensive tackle for the Pats and the Bears, among a few others. Gentlemen, what did you think about this class? Let's start with you, Dave.
Well, I find it ironic that Devin Hester got into the Hall of Fame for a play that the NFL has been neutering and
Right.
taking out of the game, but actually it's both as a kick and punt returner, because as a kick returner, he's not even the leading uh, Bears player with kick returns for touchdowns. Gale Sears actually has more kick returns for touchdowns than Devin Hester does. But it's the punt returns where he leads everybody. I think he had like 14 of them.
Yep.
So hats off to him. I just find it ironic that it's a play, the kick returning that they've kind of neutered. And I think that they could do other things. I know that the reason that they've done that is because of injuries, but I think that there's other things, and I think it was either the XFL or the USFL that had some interesting wrinkles to their kick returns that actually made it still a real part of the game. The one that kind of surprised me was Steve McMichael. I mean, yeah, he was well known, but I didn't think that his achievements were that great. And with Andre Johnson, frankly, I think Hines Ward was a better wide receiver, flat out. I mean, Andre Johnson had more receptions for more yardage, but look at the touchdowns, 85 to 70. Mm-hmm. And in head-to-head, Hines Ward, his teams won 2 out of the 3 games. He outperformed Andre Johnson head-to-head, scoring 4 touchdowns to 0 for Andre Johnson. And then even in the postseason, the Pro Football Reference now they have success rates for passing plays. Well, Hines Ward had a better success rate in both the regular season and the postseason over Andre Johnson. So, call me a homer. I think that Hines Ward deserved that over Andre Johnson, and he was an all-around player. The blocking, they changed the game because of Hines Ward, and he was a Super Bowl MVP. But the other players, I mean, Julius Peppers, I mean, obvious. Randy Gradishar, like you, surprised that he wasn't already in. So I think overall it's a good class. We can always quibble as I'm quibbling, but there we are.
Well, I think you could make that same case for that you were making for Hines Ward with Reggie Wayne, right? I mean, he also had a little bit better numbers than Andre Johnson, but you know what he had that neither one of those guys had is he got to beat the hell out of Finnegan, and everyone wanted to beat that guy up. So I'm sure because this is a voting thing, that is exactly how he got in, right? Because otherwise his numbers aren't that dissimilar to the other 2 guys, right? Like they're not, they're all in the same ballpark. So any one of them could have got in there. But if you remember that game where they ripped each other's helmets off and then he's just landing haymakers, you're like, that dude deserved all of that. So, I mean, that might have slid my vote a little his way too. So I wasn't mad at it. But yeah, some of these guys were good to see to get in. Hester, obviously, I mean, one of the few guys that were on 2 different all-decade teams. So I mean, it was cool to see him get in. And I was actually really surprised that Gradishar wasn't in. And I was also surprised because I was curious if anyone else on that team got in. And it was he's the only one of the Orange Crush D that is in the Hall of Fame, which seems wild to me. As good as that defense was, you'd think there'd be some other guys in there.
Have you noticed so many guys were in on the offense?
I didn't see, no.
Yeah. Might be interesting to check that out. Have to look that up.
Yeah.
Well, Bo, I'm picking on you again.
All right.
The Seahawks hired Ryan Grubbs as as their OC,
Yep.
and they also hired Aiden. What's it?
Oh
Dirty.
yeah. Yep.
From Jerry's Boys as their defensive coordinator.
Sure.
Bo, what did you think about these guys?
So Grubb makes sense if you're going to go after Penix, right? Because they do have to figure out what they're going to do moving forward at the quarterback position. They have a little bit of cap issue. Drew Lock is done with his 1-year deal, and he played well enough that he's going to get paid more than the Hawks can probably afford. You're realistically going to keep Geno because he has a team-friendly deal that you can get out of every year. And if you draft a quarterback and he shows out, you can move on from Geno at the end of the season, and it's really not a big deal. When you look at the DC, having a guy that I believe he was a linebacker coach. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you wouldn't get a big name DC because Mike McDonald is going to call the defense. So you need a guy that can run operations. He doesn't have to actually be the defensive coordinator, right? Because coming in, Mike McDonald is going to run that defense. So he needs a guy in the room that can facilitate that, but not actually have to do that decision making. So that's why you're seeing a guy like him come in. I do think it's a aggressive approach to have a head coach, OC and DC that have no NFL experience in the positions they are filling this year. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm optimistic about it. I mean, they got a lot of pressure on them to be good right away though, because they're coming off of Pete Carroll's era where we won a lot. Let's be honest, right? Like they in the course of Pete Carroll's tenure, they missed the playoffs 4 times. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on this group to win right away, especially because this roster was in the playoffs last year and missed it by 1 game this year. So we'll see, but I'm optimistic about the pickups.
Okay. Dave, last week we were talking about, the different people that Jerry had brought in, and we were thinking that maybe, like he was going to bring in, one of the big names and kind of slip him in as McCarthy goes on his way out. Well, instead, Jerry's boys hired Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator. What did you think about that hire, Dave?
Well, it's kind of interesting. He was a defensive coordinator with the Cowboys before, and so Jerry Jones is going back into the barrel for somebody that he's familiar with. And since then, he went to Atlanta as a defensive coordinator, was a head coach with Minnesota. So. It'll be kind of interesting to see how he meshes with Mike McCarthy, and does sometimes what happens is, depending on the ego of the coaches, if you bring another former head coach in, how's that going to work out there? And Jerry Jones, he loves stirring the pot. If you don't stir the pot every once in a while, the stew is going to get burnt.
Yep.
So it's going to be. I just think it's going to be kind of interesting just to see how they meshed it together, especially since he's not a young guy coming in. Where Mike McCarthy has his natural authority as the head coach. Overserting him. Now you got a guy that's been in that seat before, so it's going to be and also is very familiar with Jerry Jones, isn't coming in unknown because he worked quite a few years with the Cowboys in the past.
So I got a question for you then. It's I find this pickup kind of interesting, and I know that there's history with the organization, but when you look at the coaches that were without jobs are the ones that are a little bit more negative reinforcement, a little harder coaching, which Mike Zimmer is that dude. It was interesting to see this appointment, considering everyone else that embodies some of that, whether it was Belichick or Vrabel or, Bill O'Brien ended up going down to college. Like, those types of guys ended up unemployed in the league. So this seemed interesting. I'm curious how it'll play with the guys in the locker room. And I'm looking forward to how it probably doesn't play out awesome with McCarthy, because that seems like it'll be funny to watch.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like we were saying before, all of these guys with this hardcore attitude trying to teach these young kids, or even, I don't know, if your signing bonus is more than my paycheck, how much respect does that garner in today's NFL? Whereas before, a coach was almost like a godfather.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to include Bieniemy in that group, right?
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
guy that, is a little
who's had a difficulty getting. Everybody was surprised he hasn't been named the head coach.
Exactly. But he falls into that hard coaching kind of attitude. So it's interesting that Zimmer gets the job, but none of these other guys can seem to find a landing spot. Now, again, I understand that he had history there, albeit quite a long time ago now. I don't know. It's gonna be fun to watch. But do you think his coaching style meshes with the kids that are in the league today?
I don't think it meshes with Michael Parsons.
Okay.
And I think that's going to be the problem.
That would be a problem.
That is going to be, at least that's what I'm thinking that the problem is going to be. But we'll see. Jerry's boys can make a problem out of a molehill, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think anymore the interpersonal skills of the overall coaching staff really has to be taken into consideration when you're making your hires, and how these guys are going to fit in. Now, like Todd Haley, for example, they made it work in Pittsburgh. He was one of these hardcore, hard to get along with. The other coaches didn't like Todd Haley, not to mention the players. Yeah. But they made it work there. Then as soon as he went to Cleveland, and then they had it on the what's the TV show? I always forget the name of it. They show it in the preseason of the inside look at a team.
Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks. And here, you see this team with a new, pretty new head coach, and then several former head coaches on the staff, and it was obvious that there was problems just among the coaching staff to get together.
Sure. Too many.
So it's really important for these guys to mesh together, and then once they mesh together, then how is that going to work with the players? And it can be done. I mean, the Steelers made it work with Todd Haley, and then he didn't work anywhere else, and he's out of the league now.
So I mean, I guess the thought there is, though, winning cures all, right? And during that era, they were winning, right? So you can deal with a lot of annoying personalities if the wins are happening. I mean, look at Harbaugh's tenure with San Fran, right? When they were in the mix, right, they could deal with Harbaugh. As soon as they were an average team, they're like, yeah, you should probably catch a bus out of here.
Yeah, winning is a very good lubricant, very effective lubricant for friction.
Dave, the Clowns quarterback Joe Flacco was named Comeback Player of the Year. Are you okay with Joe, Dave?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I really wanted Hamlin. I mean, because literally this guy came back from almost dying to actually playing. Yeah. Now the difficulty with Hamlin is he didn't play that much this year.
Yeah. So he didn't get really games in.
What's that?
He didn't get his 85 games in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, there you go. But he did play this year, and he literally was on death's door, yesterday. Flacco came in and basically off of the couch, and but he threw as many interceptions as he did touchdowns. I mean, to me, this was more a testament to Cleveland's defense
Exactly.
and their running game more than anything. So, and of course, Cleveland, they had the coach of the year, the assistant coach of the year, the defensive player of the year, the comeback player of the year, and then they go into the first round and get smoked by the Texans, who should have been the coach of the year, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah.
So, but I mean, but Flacco, I mean, he actually surprised me in that, for me, the formula with Flacco was always get him moving and he's done. If he can sit back in the pocket, he's going to pick you apart. Yep. And actually, a couple of the defenses, he was moved out of the pocket, and he won them some games. So,
yep,
good for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you really thought DeMar Hamlin had it as soon as they're like, suit up. As soon as the first time he suited up, you're like, comeback player of the year, right? I mean, you're just like, by default, you got to win this thing. And Flacco is coming back from playing for the Jets, which, I mean, it's like an injury.
That's so, close.
I sort of get it. But, I mean, it's not like he was awesome, right? He plays 6 games, throws 14 touchdowns, 9 picks. He was averaging 320 yards a game, though. So, I mean, he was moving the ball around. But
in both directions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And what did he come back from? Being bad. Like, that doesn't like injuries I get. You're like, oh, okay, you overcame an injury. There's some like legitimate adversity that you're coming back from. It's almost like it's named that way. And then when you look at Flacco or even Geno last year, right? What are you coming back from? Not being good enough to start. Like that I don't know. I have a hard time with it, but of the candidates, he was the best option because, to your point, he didn't play, right? Like Hamlin played some gimmicky plays here and there. But I mean, he wasn't their starter. So he never really saw game time. So, I mean, you got to give the award to somebody. I'm fine with Joe getting it. It's just kind of
Nah.
Okay, Bo, the Texans sweep offensive rookie of the year and defensive rookie of the year.
And they should.
CJ won the former, and Will Anderson Jr. won the latter. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean,
according to Dave, they should have got the coach of the year too.
I agree with him. D'Amico Ryans should have won that going away. I mean, he took a team from worst to first in his first year with a rookie quarterback, and the focal point on the defense also being a rookie. I don't know how much more you could have asked him to do. And it's not like he snuck into the playoffs and didn't do anything. They won a playoff game, right? Like they got in the
plus
dance.
Having to rebuild their offensive line with all the injuries that they had.
Exactly. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better coached up team. So I really think that D'Amico got kind of hosed on that deal. That being said, not to say that Stefanski didn't. He actually somehow went 11-6 with 5 different starting quarterbacks. That is almost impossible to do too. So he definitely deserved, to be in that conversation as well. But I thought D'Amico probably should have been the winner there. Offensive rookie of the year, as far as CJ Stroud, honestly, if he doesn't get hurt, he probably wins league MVP. Right. So pretty impressive numbers he put up. Honestly, compared to Lamar, his numbers were actually better than Lamar's. So Lamar wins the MVP. But I mean, if you look at it stat wise, CJ probably still could have won that MVP. And then on the other side, Will Anderson, he balled out. He was actually right behind Myles Garrett in just about everything. So, man, their future's bright they got a lot of nice pieces. They actually have quite a bit of cap room. They got some nice picks for this draft as well coming up. So, I mean, this is a team that's going to be a problem.
What do you think there, Dave?
No, I agree with Bo. I think that Stroud was definitely the offensive rookie of the year, and he could have challenged for MVP. I mean, he kept that team ticking, and defensive player of the year, no problem at all. I like Joey Porter, but Joey Porter wasn't in that league. He had a good season, but not defensive rookie of the year. So I have no issues with that. And I really believe that the Houston coach was coach of the year. He did a marvelous job, from a team that the people weren't expecting anything from. And like with all the quarterbacks that Cleveland had, I mean, okay, you can hand off to the running backs. It's a running team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Flacco was putting up 320 yards a game. You got to be slinging the rock quite a bit for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Dave, the Steelers' defensive tackle Cameron Haywood was named the Walter Payton Man of the Year. What did you think about him winning that? The Steelers also released 3 players, including quarterback Trubinsky. And I think our first pick is number 20. Any speculations on that right now?
Well, what I'm hoping for is a center or a tackle. They need some help on the offensive line in the draft. And there's some centers in there that maybe there's a couple centers that actually might last to the second round, but I wouldn't even mind it if they reached. If these guys are pretty well guaranteed that there's a tackle from Georgia, or a center from Georgia, center from West Virginia. These guys, I think that they need somebody that number one is going to be able to snap the ball to the quarterback's hands and not roll it on the ground, and then have some longevity. And they've, right now, since Maurkice Pouncey retired, they've had a couple tries at it. Cole, he might stay on the roster as an interior lineman as a reserve, but he's not a starting center. So that's what I'm really looking for with that first pick. In terms of Cam Hayward winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, well-deserved. The Steelers have nominated him as their guy for 6 years in a row. But
yeah,
if you follow the Steelers, you constantly see Cam Hayward at hospitals, at schools, constantly doing charitable work. And he's just a good dude. I'm very, very happy for him. He wanted that award. He worked for it, and I'm glad that he got it. For the 3 players that they released, no surprise that Trubisky was released. He was due to earn, I think $5 or $6 million. Now they're talking about the Ravens maybe signing him out. There's all these rumors running around, but I got to say, the thing I'd like to mention with all 3 of these guys is, there's a lot of hate being thrown at their ways, and I hate to say it. I mean, Trubisky was a good dude. The team voted him captain his first year. He invited all the receivers and quarterbacks down to his home. That's when Haskins unfortunately died, but he was having an off-season workout down at his home in Florida. Good dude, but by what everybody says, he just doesn't have it.
I feel like you guys have 3 guys that don't have it though.
Well, that could be. I mean, Mason Rudolph really stepped up well in those last 4 games, and now he's scheduled to be a free agent. The Steelers are going to try to re-sign him. If I were his agent, frankly, I would tell him, wait till you get some offers. But Pittsburgh is going to try to re-sign him, and then Kenny Pickett. This is his year. He's either going to do it or it's not.
That's
is
what
the
we
final
said
year of
this year.
Jason's age. What's that?
That's what we said this year.
No, I mean, I've consistently said that they were going to give him 3 years, and this will be his third season. You know, unfortunately, he got injured, and then once Mason Rudolph was performing, they kept Mason Rudolph in. So we'll see what happens. There's rumors about trades. I don't think this thing with Justin Fields is going to happen. I think that's ridiculous. But depending on what happens with Mason Rudolph, is going to drive what the Steelers have to do in terms of signing a free agent or drafting a quarterback.
You could get Fields for a deal, though.
But you can get Russ for free.
You can't.
You know,
Denver
personally,
has to pay
I don't like either of those guys. But
He will cost way too much, and with the offensive line the way it is, you'd be better off with Fields' legs than Russ's legs.
if they had to give up their second draft pick, I don't think it's worth it. Now, if they can get him for something less than that, maybe.
I think you could get Fields for like a third this year and maybe a fourth next year with an escalator.
That may, I mean, and to me that might be plausible. And then the only other factor is then how does that play into the chemistry with the team? Because the ownership, Art Rooney II and Mike Tomlin basically said, "Hey, we're going to bring in competition for Kenny Pickett." So they didn't give him the starting position. They said that they would have competition.
Well, that'd be solid comp.
Yeah, and if it were something like that, I would be fine. But if it were any more than that, I would say no. I wouldn't want that.
Well, you haven't seen enough quality starts to give anything more than that anyway, right? Because what they have put him through is lack of weapons, no offensive line. I mean, his furthest throws are 10 yards down the field typically, right? Like no matter how many yards you see on a stat sheet, his air yards are pretty much right around the line of scrimmage for the most part. So you don't even really know what he is. But if you were to give up again, like a third and a fourth with an escalator, something like that, and, you bring him in and you give him a better offensive line than he had with the Bears, because that thing is, that was terrible. You can see what he has, and you still have the ability to, franchise tag him, right? So it's not like you necessarily have to sign him immediately. You would think about it probably because you're giving up a couple of draft picks, but they're not high value draft picks, right? Like a third, you can get thirds by compensatory picks, stuff like that. Same with fourths. Like you can get gifted some of those. So I think if he flames out, it's not the end of the world, but if he works, you got him relatively cheap. And because you haven't really seen quality starts out of him, he's not going to reset the market to sign him. Right. So I don't know. I could see a team like the Steelers or like the Falcons maybe taking a flyer on him, because you don't have to give up the world to get him. And, it could be better than what you could pick up.
Yeah, I think with the Steelers, and I'm thinking the way the organization would approach it, not necessarily the way I would want them to do it, but it all depends on what happens with Rudolph.
Sure.
And are they successful at re-signing him? Because they've definitively said that they do want to re-sign him. We'll see. And probably he played for the minimum, and then probably they would use the money that they're saving from Trubisky in order to save, unless another team outbids them. And if that doesn't happen, then maybe this opens up the possibilities for a trade for Fields.
I thought we were talking about the Steelers, not the Pirates. This ain't no 3 strikes and you're out. What the hell? You got 2 years already to look. I mean, come on.
No, well, I mean, I've consistently felt that they were going to. What they don't want to do is to misevaluate, and they want to make sure that they're giving this guy, just like the punter Harvin, who they cut. That was one of the 3 people that they cut.
Right.
They kept on going back. They gave him chance. And then finally they cut bait with him. And this is going to be the same thing with Pickett. He's going to have his chance in 2024. And if he doesn't do it, then he's going to be a free agent after his 4th year. They will not pick up his 5th-year option. And then Chuks Okorafor, he's probably going to be making some good money. Some team, I don't think, tackles grow on trees. He's still a big guy. He's outstayed his welcome in Pittsburgh, and I think that some team is going to sign him, and he'll probably be making somewhere between, I don't know, 12 to $15 million a year on another team, and it'll be interesting to see how he performs there. He was not cutting it in Pittsburgh, and then whatever he said, I don't know exactly what he said, but he said something during the game that got him benched, and that basically decided there. But that's created some cap savings. It nets about a little over $10 million in cap savings, and they still have more to do.
So you go you go after Reddick then?
Hassan Reddick?
Yeah. They're letting him explore trades.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but because what they did is they actually poached a player off the Ravens squad in between the regular and the postseason, and that just became official, so that they'll be able to sign this guy Moon. So with Omar Khan, it's like the old formulas, knowing the way that the Steelers operate from a player acquisition rule. All of that is out the window now, because this is Omar Khan's ship. And so, yeah, I wouldn't take that off of the board. That's a possibility. I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be a learning process, I think, for Steelers fans to figure out what is Omar Khan's formula.
Yeah, I get that. That's where I'm sitting with my Seahawks right now. I'm like, what are we gonna do?
Right.
Everyone,
and I mean, because under Colbert, it was he was predictable. You understood, even right down to which free agents were going to be re-signed and when he would do it, when they would release them. Like releasing these guys the day after the Super Bowl is unusual. That normally we would hang on to them, but this gives these guys the chance to maybe put some feelers out. I know technically they can't officially negotiate, but
Well, yeah, because they have to wait for the new league year, right?
Right. Yeah. March 13th, I think, is the key date. And so there we are. So and James, I think a lot of fans agree. I think a lot of the Steelers Nation is broken into camps. There's still the pro Kenny Pickett camp. There's still, got to get rid of him right away. There's still the fired Mike Tomlin camp still going strong. So,
yeah. Well, hey, it'll be interesting because we got all off season to talk about it. So let's talk about Super Bowl 58. Bo, do you really think that Kyle Shanahan didn't know the rules of overtime?
No,
I mean, come on now. Even the old rules, right? If you scored a field goal, the other team got a chance to get a possession.
Exactly. No, that is one of the most ridiculous excuses I've heard so far. Especially when you think of the old rule. Like, okay, maybe you didn't know that if you didn't score a touchdown, or if you scored a touchdown, the game wasn't over. Maybe you didn't know that. But you know what? You didn't have to find out because you didn't score a touchdown anyway. But, at the same time, that rule of the other team gets the ball if you kick a field goal has been a rule for, 5 years now? 5+ years? So that means that rule's been in place longer than most of these dudes have been in the league. So, I mean, that means you've been playing your whole career with these rules. So, I mean, at some point, you should probably know the rules of the game you're playing. And at the same time, if you're the coach, that's kind of on you, right? Like if your guys don't know, that's sort of your job to make them know. I didn't mind his approach though, because no matter what, the other team gets the ball, right? I would have taken the ball first also, because it sort of goes back to when it was sudden death. Because if you have, I mean, in their scenario, KC goes down, marches right down, ties the game up, just, to cause overtime, right? So your defense is kind of gassed anyway. So taking the ball first there makes sense. But even if that's not how it went down, taking the ball first makes sense in the new platform anyway, because you apply pressure if you go down and you score, right? They have to at least match you. Now, you're hoping that if you kick a field goal, you can at least slow them down enough to they have to kick a field goal, and you're playing for that third possession, which is now sudden death overtime, right? So I actually didn't mind the approach. But yeah, them not knowing what the rules are seems like it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and actually, he said they did know what the rules were.
Well, it was
but when he did it to me is even worse. What he's now claiming is that they had discussed the overtime rules, and then he deferred to the position coaches to explain that to the team before the game. But then once they were into the game, he said, well, they didn't really bring it up because, hey, if you're not going to go into overtime, don't worry about it.
Sure.
But again, what he said is that they had gone over the overtime rules, and he deferred to his position coaches to explain this to the team. And this is in response to it was the players that were saying they didn't know what the overtime rules were.
Exactly.
Now, here's the thing what I don't like. Okay, when he was with the Redskins with his dad, they threw RG3 under the bus for getting hurt and then wanting to go back in. And instead of being coaches and saying and agreeing with the doctor, no, you're too hurt, we're going to hold you back, they put him back in and probably destroyed his career.
Oh, they did. They did. They did that again.
Kyle and Mike Shanahan, they threw the player under the bus. Now, 10 years later, I would have thought maybe Kyle Shanahan, who's supposed to be a wonderkind, right? He's supposed to know it all.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope that he would have matured and learned, don't throw your players or your coaches under the bus. And what he's done here is he's thrown his position coaches under the bus.
Yeah.
He's saying, I knew the rule. I explained it to my coaches, and they were to explain that to the players.
It's funny because
it's a bad look to me.
Oh, it totally is. He goes from being the offensive genius that everybody likes to say that he is, to the old Budweiser commercial, real men of genius.
Right. And really what it is and he gets this from his dad, never take any blame, never accept responsibility, always put it on somebody else. And I've never liked that about the Shanahan. I used to call them the shenanigans.
Well, and that's why Wilkes got fired today.
Yeah, and that now, well, I mean, again, he's taking the blame for it, right?
Well, and it doesn't even make sense that he would get the blame for it. Of all the mistakes that were made in that game, the defense wasn't the one we were talking about.
Yeah, fumbling the ball at the 29-yard line,
right? Or multiple special teams failures, right? So I mean, if anybody, if you're going to have like a fall guy, it should have been your special teams guy, right? Like that coach probably gets fired. You're like, okay, you had a field goal blocked. You had, a couple of things muffed. You had one go off a guy's ankle. Like anything that could have happened in, special teams did, right? And so it's just like, yeah, if you were going to make a fall guy have to go, you would think it'd be that special teams coach. Instead, they go after the one unit that actually played extraordinarily well all day until the last few minutes when they were gassed because you guys didn't use a running play for the entire third quarter.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to, on our town hall Monday night, our Steelers town hall, we were going back and forth over the overtime rules, and then the reason why he didn't need to call a timeout there at the end of the first overtime.
Well, it was a new game. It's not one period. So it's why they explained it that way, right? Is this is the start of a new game. Both teams get to possess, right? So your quarter doesn't matter if it ends. You get to finish your possession.
Right.
And
So even if time had run out, the next overtime period they would have started right where they were at.
Exactly. Yep.
And they could have run their next play, and so that was an issue. It was just we had a big discussion about that, and people were explaining why, because some people were criticizing his time management at the end of that first period. No, that was not an issue at all.
no, it was execution. That's what it was. But it had nothing to do with time management.
Yeah.
Bo, what did you think about Ayuk's post-game remarks? Did it sound like like maybe he was throwing his coach under the bus?
Oh, I actually didn't hear his what was his quote? I feel like I missed it.
Well, he was talking about that he wants to be. When they were talking about where he wants to be, he said he wants to be on a team of champions, and it does. I mean, it didn't.
He was being asked if he was going to come back.
Okay. Well, yeah, because his contract's up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like because I'm sarcastic enough, if I was the person asking that and he said that, I'd be like, well, I mean, you guys were NFC champions 4 out of the last 5 years. I mean, that's technically a champion, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they can afford him anyway, honestly. They are going to be coming up against some cap issues moving forward anyway, as I recall.
Yeah. Ayuk actually is the better route runner. At least I think so. I might be wrong. But what do you think, Bo, as someone that's had to run those routes?
I mean, he's a good route runner. He's not their main target. So,
No.
I mean, he's a few guys back, right? Like when you're thinking of their number one targets, you're thinking CMC coming out of the backfield. You got Debo, you got Kittle, then you have Ayuk, right? So, I mean, some of it is probably frustration just for lack of use, right? Because he is a great route runner, a great receiver, honestly. And he would probably be, a great wide receiver too on just about any team. There's probably a couple of teams that would ultimately use him as a one, just because they're devoid of talent. But I can get some of his frustration for sure.
What did you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think what fans forget is that players have different motivations, and that not everybody is necessarily all in it for the team that they're with. And I think with Brandon Ayuk, he's in a position, if he's becoming a free agent, well, he needs to think about, where am I going to earn the most money? I mean, that's and I think a lot of fans, they want him to sign back, take a home team discount, which that doesn't exist. I mean, why would any player take a home team discount?
It
doesn't make sense.
Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady.
So it's different if you're winning rings.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Because now you're getting endorsement money to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I mean, you have the exceptions that prove the rule, but in general for these players, and it's like Bo's saying, some teams might make him a number one. Well, what does he want to be? He wants to be a number one, right? Because then he's going to make number one money.
Yeah.
Number one wide receiver money. So I think, for me, I had no problems with what he said. I mean, it was just basically, hey, I mean, I'd like to play for a championship team, and he didn't close the door on anybody. And if he's going to be a free agent, well, now he needs to keep his eyes open for what's out there. And I don't blame him at all for that. And everybody has different motivations and levels of commitment to the team that they're on. And that's what fans often forget.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Scott. How are you doing?
Very good. I was doing very good for most of the day, and then I was down in my lair, just doing my research, and I came upstairs, and the dreaded snow is
Oh,
outside.
Well,
Dreaded snow is out. We've been just 50 degrees. I've been out doing a little light jogging and doing a little work outside, and even queuing a little bit, and all of a sudden today, bomb dropped.
Mr. Scott, you live in Minnesota.
I know.
You have more snow than you do Sundays.
Yeah. But this year has been a real anomaly. We really haven't had any, and and it's such, for some reason, people love to take shots. My cousin in Atlanta, oh, he's just so giddy. He's just head over heels. Oh, I saw you got snow up there. I mean, it's not funny. I mean, this is no joke. This whole thing is the script unflipped right now. So, but other than that, we'll deal with it. We'll deal with it.
Mr. Scott, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret there. I was from Pittsburgh. At the tender age of 58, I decided that I did not like snow anymore, and I moved to San Diego. I didn't have to go through no border crossings. I didn't have to fight my way under barbed wire. I got in an airplane and I came to California. So my
where the water doesn't freeze.
and I made sure it was the most southern part of California I could get to. I can't go further south than this.
Well, if this keeps up, I'll probably have to get in touch with you to see if you have a couch or a sleeping bag. Even a comfortable chair will work.
Mr. Scott, it is Valentine's Day, and I have a hammock in my front yard.
I don't know if that type of accommodations is what I was really seeking.
It's still warmer somehow, though.
I'm just saying you have alternatives. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you for your concern. I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Scott, do you believe that a coach the caliber of Kyle Shanahan did not know the rules of overtime?
They keep changing the rules. I mean, really. I mean, I was totally in the dark as to what they were doing once it went to overtime. To me, it should still be sudden death. But okay, they want to give everybody a chance, so everybody gets a chance.
But under the rules of sudden death, you have to score a touchdown, not a field goal.
No, he's talking about the original sudden death, where it literally was first point scored wins.
Yes, game's over.
Oh, okay. That's
I mean, it's been a minute, but yeah.
Yeah, that's further back than my memory. Jesus. Okay.
So yeah, do you receive? And it's a critical call. Do you receive if you win the toss? Yeah. So are you going to take the ball or are you going to give the ball?
Channel your inner Matt Hasselbeck. We want the ball. We're going to score.
but the ref,
you can't score.
The referee announced both teams shall possess the ball. The referee announced that.
Yeah.
And they told the coaches before the game.
Yes, they have the meeting before the game where they go over all the rules. That's all discussed. It's just like, they check the hands, make sure there's no foreign objects. They go through the whole thing and discuss the rules. Nothing in your boots, nothing,
This guy makes in 1 year what we have all combined to make in a lifetime. And he can't read a rule book. He can't look at. I mean, you can Google anything. He could have Googled that on his tablet. Overtime rules.
Yep.
But hey, it is what it is. Mr. Scott, did you stick around and did you see any of the post game interviews?
I saw a few. I mean, the post game hooplas and those kind of things. That's never been my. Game's over. You lost. You won. Then they're going to celebrate. So no, was there anything in particular that?
I was talking about the Ayuk's remarks and what you thought of him, whether or not he was going to be back as a 49er. But now, guys, I'm going to go way off track here because I'm going to give Mr. Scott a chance to put on his black socks. Mr. Scott, what did you think of the halftime show?
Oh, funny.
I saw snippets, but my main man Prince. I mean, you're never going to top that. In my lifetime. I mean, that was the show of shows. I mean, this, they keep stretching and they're trying to make these things interesting, and and then to bring the rappers out, then they just went to a whole nother, went down for me. And is Usher the caliber of a Michael Jackson and Prince? And in my mind, no. And I think they're still struggling to find somebody. I mean, they might as well have Taylor. Taylor was there. I mean, she's the big name. So no, I wasn't impressed by the halftime show. I didn't do much. Didn't do much for me. I mean, I turned the game on to see football. Okay, that's what I wanted to see, the two best teams. So the halftime
want to see
show,
the pole dancers?
The
ones that were lining the stage.
Oh man. Okay. All right. Let's get back to the game. All right, guys. Now, I'm as I told everyone before, I just don't bet against Patrick Mahomes, especially when it comes to the big games. Here's a guy that was down by 10 in his last 3 games and ends up a champion. So I'm not ready to necessarily call him the GOAT, but I do think that he has a possibility of getting at least 5 rings. He's already has 3, so this is not a big stretch. What is your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes' future, Mr. Scott?
Yeah, I think if there's a current GOAT, he's it. And, the game itself, it was very interesting, to see that the San Francisco defensive coordinator gets fired. And so that's why I was wondering where Demetrius is. Where is Demetrius? But because the Lions actually ran on them. I mean, they must have got almost 200 yards on San Francisco on the ground. And then Kansas City really didn't have a great running attack. So it was just kind of a strange kind of a deal. I mean, they were definitely the 2 best teams, but and I'm like you. I can't go against Mahomes. I mean, at this point, he figures a way. He'll throw it with his left hand if he has to. He'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then Andy Reid. What I mean, is he getting up there with some of the real greats? I mean, he certainly suppressed a guy named Tomlin in my mind. So not to pick on anybody,
Dave, what did you think about Patrick and his future? 5, and I'm just saying that with the speed of the game, you got up and comers like C.J. Stroud. You never know, but
Well, my thought about it is, number one, I thought that Kansas City was very vulnerable this year. Once they gave up, once Tyreek Hill left, And I really thought that they were vulnerable. And to win 3 Super Bowls in this age of parity, because the NFL has really worked hard at spreading the wealth and not allowing teams to become, uh, decade-long champions. To me, it's a pretty amazing feat that he did. When one of the best quarterbacks that I ever thought was Dan Marino, and when he went to the Super Bowl as a rookie, and then lost to Joe Montana, I thought, well, he'll be back. Well, he never got back. And that's before a lot of this parity, some of the current parity rules that have been put in. And so I think what Kansas City has done, Andy Reid, I would say he's a more accomplished coach than Mike Tomlin. Clearly he is. And to win the 3 Super Bowls and to have Pat Mahomes engineer those drives to win the games, I would say he's in the running, and right now it's up to other teams to knock him off the pedestal.
Well, especially when you think of the success he's had throughout his career, right? So it's not just the 3 rings that he's won. It's also the fact that he was able to carry 2 different franchises to Super Bowls. Now, he didn't win with the Eagles, but I mean, he went to 2 Super Bowls and three championship games, right? So, I mean, his success, it cements him as one of the top coaches all time, no matter what.
Correct.
Even if he were to hang it up today.
Yeah, so, I do. Speaking of Marino, a lot of people don't know this. Denny talked Marino out of retirement. He came up here to Minnesota, and I thought he had an agreement, but then he decided he wanted to stay retired. But he actually came up here, and I was hoping that they were going to get him here, the Vikings.
That would have been interesting.
I had a friend that worked at the Pittsburgh airport at the FBO there, and a few years ago, Dan Marino was coming through, and his buddy had a football in their office, and he said, "Hey, will you throw us a football?" And so, like a 50-year-old Dan Marino, he's like 20 yards away, flicks the ball, and it goes right through the guy's hands, hits him in the chest, and he's like crumpled. He gets up, he pulls up his shirt, and there's an X right where the football hit. And that was like a 50-year-old Dan Marino firing
a dart at him.
And didn't mean to. It just kind of like flicked it, and it's just. I mean that guy could pass the ball.
He had a cannon. There's no doubt.
Well, see, Denny went after guys like that. I mean, Jeff George, he ends up here. Warren Moon. I mean, Denny was, oh my God, he just couldn't get it. If it wasn't for that Gary Anderson, boy, I wish I could just.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people feel like that about Gary Anderson.
Makes every field goal. Makes no misses. Chip shot.
Kind of like Sunday's game, right? Guys, where do you rate Spags as a defensive coordinator, Bo?
I mean, their defense was great. Like it was the best part of that team this year. So, I imagine he's going to get a raise to stay.
Well, he just did. Didn't he get? Yeah. He just get an extension today, 4 years or something like that.
Earlier today, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's a good move because this is the best defense that they've had in the Mahomes era, right? But to answer your first question, I don't think Mahomes is in the GOAT conversation yet. The conversation you can definitely say he's a part of is the Mount Rushmore conversation. Like, is he one of the top 4? You could make a real case for that. As far as being the greatest ever, there's a couple of guys that have a stack of rings ahead of him still. So, he's got a couple more things to do before he can say that. But I would imagine Montana's next on his list to take down. And then it's Brady, right? And he's got some work to catch him. But I could see 5 rings being a legitimate option for Mahomes.
So, Mr. Scott, what did you think about Spags as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, they did a good job. Win games, that's what you do. But the one from San Francisco, I mean, he gets the team to the Super Bowl and then you lose your job. I mean, is that?
But you didn't win.
But his career, has been really strange because he's coached a long time, but he's only stayed at places a year or two. Almost everywhere he's gone, you look at the whole thing of it's only a year or two. I mean, that's just really kind of strange to me to have that many jobs. I mean, every year it's almost like he has a different job.
Now, there might be more to the story back there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that part of it with him. But no, I think Mahomes is definitely on the road to being one of the greats because he has. See, Brady was pretty much statuesque, pocket quarterback. I mean, and got rid of the ball quick.
To me, all the other defenses and all that.
Yeah, and he just seemed to know exactly where he was going. And so it was a different style, a different deal to me. And I think Mahomes, he just has these instincts. I see him miles ahead of Lamar, which I was so shocked how Lamar performed because I thought if he had just went completely playground, he could have won that game. But he just stayed back and didn't really do his thing. But Mahomes is gonna, I don't know, 2 more championships. I think it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Is Andy going to stay? I don't know.
And Andy said he'll be back next year, at least.
At least next year, huh?
I mean, you have to. You have to. You got to try for that
3-peat.
It's never been done.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to run it back and see if you could do it. I don't think they do, but you have to try.
Well, there's always naysayers. I mean, there's always going to be those. I mean, that's.
Well, I mean, come on now.
It's never been done for a reason, right? There's too much parity in the league. You got to win a lot of games, and you got to win 4 key ones in a row.
and if you looked at their wide receiving core, like I said, I think people slept on their defense. But if you looked at their wide receiving core and you looked at their running back situation, you would say no way that they make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Compared to everything that they had lost. I mean, I'm sure on paper, the Steelers' wide receiver core ranked higher than Kansas City.
No. KC actually had a top 2 defense on like yards allowed and stuff.
Defense. Yeah, I said the wide receiving core.
Oh, wide receiver. Oh, yeah, they were terrible. I mean, some of what aided them getting there is the fact that half the quarterbacks in the league got hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, so there. We'll put it this way: we just had our 58th Super Bowl, and if you had a starting quarterback for every year that the Super Bowl was played, it would still be less than the amount of starting quarterbacks this season. So it's a little crazy. I mean, when you think of the Browns having started 5 different quarterbacks because of injuries this year, right? That's one team. And just about every team had their quarterback go down at some point. So it's I mean, some of their success was just the amount of injuries at the quarterback position that happened this year.
Quick question, guys. Do you think what happened this year will lead to more teams adopting a 3-quarterback system, but with one that has to be mobile?
No. I mean, maybe someone would do it. I don't like that practice because you have to rely on your offensive line to then be really proficient at a completely different play style that they play the entire year. I never like when your backup quarterback has a wildly different skill set, because
look at the Saints this year when they kind of like went back and forth with quarterbacks. I don't think it served them too well.
No, it never does, right? Like if you have a line designed for a guy that mostly stays in the pocket, right? Their blocking style is not going to be great for a guy that needs to move around. And vice versa, right? Like if you got a guy that's used to moving, that line now adjusts how its blocking schemes are to accommodate a guy that moves around. And now if you got a guy that doesn't move, he's going to get hit by a lot of guys.
Yeah. Now what you might have to do is like you might have two quarterbacks with different styles.
Sure.
But you play the one, and then the other one is the backup, and then you have to adjust. And then I think it was John Fox and the Broncos, whenever they benched their quarterback and brought in I can't think of his name. He beat the Steelers in the overtime game in the overtime playoff game.
Oh, Tim
Tebow, and they completely revamped their offense. But that's what they had to do, and they made the playoffs.
Sure.
And good. But if they had tried alternating the guys,
that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no way
that wouldn't work.
And even the initial doesn't work right away, right? Because you're basically retraining that line to block differently. And so, yeah, I'm never a big fan when they're wildly different. They can have different styles, but if they have a similar base gameplay, right? The style can change, but if the base gameplay is wildly different, and it's usually ugly.
I mean, even right now down to the snap counts, on the quarterbacks, the way they bark, and the inflections they have. I mean, that can impact the line.
Yeah, but the Vikings had to actually flip the script when Cousins went out and the Pasternak came in. And I mean, there was two games where it's completely different because the Pasternak had the great ad-lib ability. He had the great ad-libbing ability. He was athletic and he had a decent enough arm, but then they gave up on it. They lose the game. Oh, we got to go try somebody else now. The other guy losing, we got to try somebody else now. I really think if they had stayed with him.
Everybody loves a backup for a game or two. And then all of a sudden there's tape.
Yeah, but he was winning. He won two games, and then you lose one, and then you sit, and your main guy's hurt. It's not like you can go back to the main guy, which I would understand.
Well, no, but their second stringer came back, so that's actually why he got sat. Was their second stringer? Why they brought him in was actually hurt, so they brought him in. He loses that third game. Their normal second string guy came off from injury. That's how that ended up going back.
Then he could be a perfect backup. He was hurt. He's been out. This guy's been in. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's the decisions that the coaches and they have to make those decisions and live with them.
Josh had a heck of a season. I mean, because first it was with Arizona.
Yes, and he played half the season.
And then they let him go, and it's like, oh well, Arizona's they just want to tank the season away. And then he goes up to Minnesota, and yeah. I'd like to see him in coaching. He was very popular, still is very popular in Pittsburgh.
You have to think that he's going to get picked up. I think he played well enough to be a backup somewhere.
You think so? Yeah, I would. Boy, if you put like Kansas City, just think if they had McCaffrey. Just think if they had him.
Sure.
It'd be a done deal.
Mr. Scott, what did you think about your Timberwolves at the trade deadline?
That's what I kind of want to talk to Demetrius about. It seems like they picked up some money from Detroit. Guy had been hurt, but he's experienced guard. I tell you, Timberwolves are rolling. Boy, when the other night when they went into the Clippers and knocked them off, I mean, ran them off. This is rarefied air. So. I think that Anthony Edwards, Towns, they've got this thing worked out with Rudy in the middle. It took a while to kind of adjust to the Twin Tower thing. But it's, boy, it looks like it's rolling. I think they're set. Whole squad is good. Well, the coaching staff is going to be at the All-Star game. The coach, the staff, everybody's going to be coaching the game. I mean, this is rarefied air. And then you got Alex Rodriguez, one of the owners now. He sits courtside, star power. I mean, hey, we're on the map. Let me just get rid of this snow. Boy, this is beyond like neck bone.
All right. Well, I see Bill came in just in time to get the final thoughts in. How you doing, Bill?
Yeah, well, I had to finish up my show, so
I understand. But
I figured for the interest in time, you just sent it to him right at the end.
No. Bill, what were your thoughts on Super Bowl 58?
it was incredibly similar to what I said in one of my videos. I was off by 2 points on each team. I had predicted 27-24. I had described how the game would end. I didn't say overtime. So the two things I got wrong were 2 points on each team on the score, and I didn't put overtime in there. But I said the 49ers would score to retake the lead, and then they would leave too much time, and Patrick Mahomes would take their hearts back. It was, I don't want to say it was predictable, but I kind of predicted it, so I guess it was a little predictable.
I have to ask you about your favorite team. What's with the Lakers, Bill? It seems once again we have went down to the retirement home. Spencer Dinwiddie, a couple other guys. I mean, what?
So what they did is they looked at Foster James and said, "No, we need more old legs. We need more guys who have pains. We need more guys who don't want to play back to back. We need more guys who get like their NIL deals from Absorbine Jr. and Lidocaine, Blue Emu, and Tommy Copper. Guys who like that Diddy's early bird special. We need more guys who can get that AARP discount on flights. It's a fascinating way to build a team, James. So they said, okay, our team is old and slow and breaking down, but here's what we'll do. We'll get older. No one will expect that. They won't see that coming. When they think we're going to zig, we'll zag. Brilliant.
They're only playing for the in-season tournament. Then they're out of gas.
In-season tournament.
Oh.
In-season tournament champions to you, young man.
Yeah, raise that banner.
Oh, boy.
Well, guys, it's been fun. Let's start out. Bo, final thoughts, man.
Yeah, so final thoughts obviously goes out today to the Super Bowl parade. Tragic events there. I mean, what are we doing? Like you can't even go out and enjoy a Super Bowl parade anymore. One dies, 22 are shot. I know a couple of them got caught, right? They were in custody. We still don't really know what's going on, but condolences to the families. And, let's just try and do better as people. I mean, I don't know what the hell we're doing out there.
Yeah, I think it's time for a little more than thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, we should be looking at something Jimmy Carter put in process with the mental health situation, right? Now, obviously, his program got washed away when Reagan, did some budget cuts. But, I mean, there needs to be some sort of mental health aspect to our government because the way that we're doing it today obviously doesn't work very well.
Mr. Scott, I'm going to come to you because your town has known tragedy such as this in many forms. Your final thoughts for the evening, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, first, I guess I just have to co-sign everything Bull said. I mean, it's to a point now where, do we arm ourselves? I mean, is it going to get to this type of point when you try to go places? So, yeah, that's a very, very sad state of affairs. But what I've been on my mind too, and I really want to follow up with Bill about this, is the people that haven't made it into this Hall of Fame. You know, and I've mentioned before Jim Marshall. I think he would definitely be in. But then I happened to come across a story. I was looking at something my uh, local guy Tony Oliva. He finally got in, and him and Dick Allen were 1 point away for several years. And so, as I remember, Dick Allen, one of my all-time favorite players, and I don't know why. He moved around. He just hit the ball. And the big thing is, I looked at how he grew up in Pennsylvania, and outside, I don't know if it was outside of Pittsburgh or outside of Philadelphia. It's a little small town. And then he gets signed by the Phillies, and they want to send him to Arkansas. And he's like, "Don't send me down there. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to go there." So they send him to Arkansas, and immediately he runs into all this racism. They're throwing batteries at him. He can't eat at the restaurant. He's like, "What the hell is going on?" He wasn't used to any of that as growing up, and he just knocks the cover off the ball. Just knocks the cover off the ball, and does the same thing in Philadelphia, but still runs into all this stuff. And they trade him around. They say he's a troublemaker. His teammates said, "No, he's a great guy, awesome ball player." And he kept missing. Him and Tony Oliva missed for 2 straight times by 1 vote. And Tony finally made it. And then they say Dick didn't play long enough. Well, he played longer than Tony. He must have played almost 15 years with 3 different teams, 300 some home runs, productive right up to the end when he quit. And I didn't realize that he was actually traded for Curt Flood.
Right, exactly.
I had forgot all about that until I went through went through his bio. I said, "No, I get it. Now, okay, this was the turning point of the whole thing." And Flood, as we know, he wouldn't go. He said, "No, you can't just trade me. I don't want to go." And Dick quit a couple of teams. He just walked off. Just said, "I'm not going to play anymore." And they had to coax him to come back and play for the treatment. So I just think about some of the guys that really, the Hall of Fame, sometimes it's like it's a Hall of Fame, but I don't know if it's the voters' perceptions or whatever. And I think that kind of spreads over into life too. So, but that's one of the things I was thinking about.
Tony, after the they had a lot of congressional hearings over that, which resulted in the free agency. The trade between Dick Allen and Curt Flood. But as a kid, we took a field trip to D.C. I lived right outside of D.C. And we went into one of the hearings, and that was one of the hearings that was taking place. And I just remember seeing Bowie Kuhn, who was the commissioner of baseball at the time. And he was in this all white outfit. It was during the summer, no air conditioning. This is like probably around 69 or 70, I think. And I just remember seeing this big, tall guy in this white suit with a Panama hat on and the hearings there. But and I had his baseball card, Dick Allen's. Actually, both of them, Curt Flood and Dick Allen's baseball cards. But great players, both of them.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I might as well get your final thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to add on, I mean, this tragedy in Kansas City. The thing I'd like to shout out though are the 1 or 2 guys that actually tackled the shooters.
Yeah.
And maybe save some additional lives. And I know that took a great deal of bravery. Usually the police don't want you to get involved, but what are you going to do?
Yep.
You got an active shooter. You got to make a choice. And these guys made a choice. I don't know who they are, what their backgrounds are or anything, but I'd like to give them a shout out, because, they may have saved more lives. And it's just a shame that this happens in our country. The one thing I'll mention, and I sent you guys a link to it. I do my updated top 500 all-time Steelers every year. So I think I sent you guys links to that on that little chat group there. And it's just something that I enjoy because I get to learn more about former Steelers going way back. And so I just like keeping up that list. So that's it.
When's that updated list coming out, Dave?
It should be. I sent a link on the text. We had a group chat on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll send it to you again.
Okay.
I do it every year, and I was waiting to see if T.J. Watt would get Defensive Player of the Year. I already knew that he wouldn't, so I already had it drafted. But I waited to see, and so it just came out a couple days ago.
Okay. Bill, glad to see you guys here. We've been trying to cut it down to 2 hours or less. So, Bill, your final thoughts.
You're on mute.
Your lips are moving.
That's one way to trim it.
Yeah, that is one way to.
I see your mouth working. I see your mouth working, but I don't hear anything.
Right. So, first of all, thank you so much. And shout out, of course, to Jeff Barnes, my co-host on Draft Central on Team MBS Media. But on this day, well, not on this day, on the day before this day, on the 13th of February, in the year of our Lord 1920, Andrew Rube Foster, who was one of the great pitchers of all time and isn't discussed often enough what a great pitcher he was. But the other thing that he did that changed the history of this nation forever was he founded the Negro National League on this day in 1920. And when they, together with the, rival / partner league, the Eastern Colored League, the ECL, came along 4 years later, that now set up the Negro World Series, which is played between the champions of those two leagues. And it was some of the best baseball you could ever want to see. And so Pop Lloyd, Willie Wells, Jackie Robinson, Cool Papa Bell, Satch, Josh, the list goes on, who played in that league and or the other league and in the World Series, wouldn't have had those opportunities if not for the foresight, the courage, and frankly, almost foolhardy hopefulness that Rube Foster had, because as the Roaring 20s turned into the Depression 30s, the Negro Leagues always were operating on the margins anyway, just by the very nature of being a Negro league. I mean, you're already on the margins already. It was always a hair's breadth away from being wiped out by something, and they managed to keep it going for a little while. The ECL itself collapsed in 1928, but its member teams reemerged as the American Negro League, the ANL, in 1929. And then the Negro National League collapsed in 1931, but was reorganized in 1933. Once again, as I talked about, because of the Depression. The Negro American League reconstituted itself 4 years later, and several of the original teams from the Negro National League managed to sort of pull together. And the second incarnation of the Negro National League lasted until 1948. And then the surviving teams all merged into the NAL, the Negro American League, which finally kept alive until 1960, when essentially the Negro League ceased to exist, at least as high-level baseball. And while it is a sign of progress, sort of, that there's no obvious need for an entirely separate professional baseball league to give Black Americans a chance to play professional baseball, the number of young Black people playing professional baseball or playing any kind of baseball has steadily declined in each succeeding decade since the 1960s. So when my dad was growing up, they would play baseball pretty much all year round, unless it was super, in Virginia, it would only get, into the 20s a couple of times a year. So they could play almost all year round, and they would play before school. They would play after school. They would play when they're done with the chores. No adults, right, needed to help them or organize them. They would find equipment, make equipment, pretend they had equipment, share equipment. And it was just purely for the love of the game. And baseball has made certain noises about wanting to restore, its connection to Black America. If they were truly serious, I'd like to see a foundation named for Andrew Rube Walker, and it would not simply be in the inner cities, right? They say, the RBI program is inner city based. And while I certainly appreciate the attempt, but so many of the greatest players, Black and white, didn't come from anybody's cities. They came from little podunk, sub-podunk towns that you couldn't find on a map hardly. And that's where Major League Baseball has failed to do anything to address the near death in participation amongst young Americans, both Black and white. And so if they're truly serious, I would like to see them invest in finding and developing talent, finding and developing people who also work in other phases of the game. If that includes things from sports medicine to marketing. If the will was there, the means would be found. And while they say and do the right things, at least in PR, in sort of public relations venues, I don't see a massive investment in saving a generation of young Americans of all races, but particularly where the precipitous drop-off has been in the position of Black Americans, where there was so much great talent that at one time there was a bidding war, right? That, once again, drove the Negro Leagues out of existence. And now, the percentage of Black Americans on major league rosters is now below the number it was in 1970. The percentage is below the number it was in 1970. So the progress has rolled backwards. So on this day, I would like to remember what Rube Foster did in 1920 and hope that somebody will have the courage to build upon his legacy. That is my final thought.
Well, guys, as always, great talking sports with you. Hope to see everybody next week. And hey, great Super Bowl. Too bad the NFL season's over with, but I'm sure we'll find some topics to talk about.
Yeah, the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves
right,
they're talking to town. Timberwolves are talking to the league. Anthony Edwards, Kyle Anthony Towns.
Yeah. Well, make sure you get here before 7:00 then. All right, guys.
Also,
I'll see everybody next week.
Combine links dropped too, so the 321 players are invited to the combine, which released also.
Yep.
Okay. All right, guys. See you next week. We'll talk about the combine too.
Take care. Hope you're feeling better, Bill.
Well, I'm not going to die, so I'll see you then.
All right. Ciao.
All right, guys.